I was 19 the first time I realized my future didn't belong to me. It belonged to my brother. My name's Drew, and at the time, I didn't have much to my name except a half-dead HP laptop with a cracked screen, a pair of noise-canceling headphones I got secondhand, and a brain that couldn't stop thinking about code. Ever since I was 12, I'd been obsessed with how things worked behind the screen. I taught myself Python using YouTube tutorials on a borrowed school Chromebook. Built a browser game in JavaScript when I was 14. At 16, I made a simple budgeting app for my mom after she complained about losing track of her grocery expenses. She never used it, of course, but that didn't matter to me. I wasn't doing it for applause. I was doing it because I couldn't not do it. My parents never really understood any of that. My dad, Harold, was a welder who believed in real work, the kind that made your back hurt and your hands calloused. And my mom, Diane, came from a long line of people who thought computers were just a phase, like frosted tips or beanie babies. The kind of people who say things like, "You need a real skill," while struggling to use the printer. Still, I figured when the college acceptances started rolling in, they'd see I wasn't just some kid tapping away at a keyboard in the dark. I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd take me seriously. I was wrong. When I got into 2 solid-state schools for computer science, I came to them with the letters in my hands and this dumb, hopeful grin on my face. I thought they'd be proud. Instead, my mom didn't even look up from her phone. "That's nice, honey. But have you thought about community college?" she said, like I'd just told her I got a coupon in the mail. My dad just asked if the schools taught plumbing too, just in case. But the real kick in the teeth came a few weeks later when I sat down with them to talk about tuition. I knew we didn't have much money, but I'd been offered some scholarships, and I was ready to hustle. Part-time job, campus housing, the works. All I needed was their help co-signing for a small loan. That's when my mom gave me the look. You know the one. Head tilted, lips pursed, voice soft like she's breaking bad news. "Be realistic, Drew," she said. "Your brother needs that tuition more than you." I actually laughed at first. I thought she was joking. But her face didn't change. Neither did my dad's. They just stared at me like I should have known. My brother, Eric, was 23 at the time. He'd already dropped out of 2 different programs, business, then hospitality, and spent most of his days tinkering with get-rich-quick schemes that never panned out. One week it was flipping sneakers, the next it was crypto, then it was a drop-shipping empire. Every time something failed, my parents wrote it off as a learning experience. "He's figuring himself out," they'd say. "He just needs a little more support." Apparently, that support was now my future. "So what?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "You're giving my college fund to him, even though he's not even in school anymore?" My dad shrugged. "He's your older brother. He's going through a rough patch. You'll find another way. You're the smart one, remember?" That night, I sat in my room staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of it all. It wasn't even about the money anymore. It was about what they saw when they looked at me. Not a person with ambition or talent, just a backup plan. A spare. The dependable one who didn't need help because he'd figure it out. I packed my things the next morning. My mom cried. My dad offered me $100 and said, "You'll be back when the real world hits you." I didn't take the money. Instead, I withdrew $300 from the summer job I'd been working at a local cafe, stuffed my cracked laptop into a backpack, and took a bus 2 hours away to a friend's garage in a small town near the city. He let me crash there for a few weeks while I figured things out. It smelled like motor oil and cold pizza, but it was freedom. I worked part-time at a computer repair shop, fixed old motherboards, installed RAM, and taught myself front-end development at night. I was exhausted, broke, and eating more ramen than any human should, but I was building something. And nobody could take that from me. I didn't call home. They didn't call me either. Every now and then, I'd hear from my cousin that Eric had started some new venture, like an online casino that got flagged for fraud 2 months in, or a wellness brand that was just repackaged dollar store vitamins. Each time, I expected a call, some acknowledgement that they'd picked the wrong horse. But nothing ever came. They'd doubled down on him, and I was the family ghost now. Then one night, about 5 years later, I was sitting in the apartment I could finally afford, small, clean, quiet, with a dual monitor setup that would have made 16-year-old me cry from joy when I got a knock on the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened it, and there they were. My parents, standing awkwardly in the hallway, holding a Tupperware container of homemade lasagna like it was a peace offering. And behind them, looking sheepish but not quite sorry, was Eric. That was the moment I knew something was up. They hadn't seen me in 5 years. Hadn't called, hadn't messaged, hadn't so much as reacted to my birthday posts on Facebook. And now they were here? With lasagna? I let them in. I shouldn't have, but I did. The tension was thick, like walking into a dinner party where someone had just finished yelling. My mom gave me a weird, forced smile and said, "You've done well for yourself, Drew." My dad just nodded and muttered something about the place looking nice. But Eric wouldn't meet my eyes. I offered them water. We sat down. That's when they finally said it. They needed $120,000. Not a typo. Not a joke. Eric had, apparently, hit a rough spot again. Something about an investor, some kind of failed app, maybe a loan with ridiculous interest. The details were fuzzy, and every time I asked for clarification, my mom just waved her hand like, "It's complicated." What was clear was that the business had collapsed. Hard. And not only was Eric facing lawsuits, he was also on the hook for paying back more money than any of them could imagine. "So we came to you," my dad said, his tone shifting into that voice he used when I was 12 and left the garage light on. "You're in tech now. You're doing great. We figured you could help your brother out of a jam." I didn't respond right away. I just stared at them. These people who once told me to be realistic, who gave up on me without a second thought, who never even asked if I was okay all those years. And now they wanted 6 figures? That was when Eric finally spoke. He said something so ridiculous, so shameless, that I almost forgot to breathe. And that, right there, is where everything started to shift, where the part of me that had spent 5 years holding on to restraint and forgiveness finally cracked. Eric didn't even look at me when he spoke. He kept his eyes low, picking at the frayed seam of his jeans like a kid waiting to be scolded. And then, with a sigh so rehearsed it almost sounded bored, he said, "Look, I know I've made mistakes, but I wouldn't be in this situation if I had the same support you got." I blinked. My mouth actually fell open a little. For a second, I thought maybe I misheard him. "The same support?" I repeated. He looked up finally, and I'll never forget the expression he wore. This strange blend of self-pity and entitlement, like he truly believed he'd been cheated out of something that was rightfully his. "Yeah," he said, "you gotta just go off and do your thing. No pressure. No one breathing down your neck. You had time to find yourself." I never had that. I was always expected to succeed. It messed with my head, man. I let out a short, sharp laugh. It wasn't even funny. It was just that kind of disbelief-laced laughter you can't suppress when someone says something so backwards you can't process it in silence. "You had everything handed to you," I snapped. "They paid for your first 2 colleges. They co-signed your car. They covered your rent twice when you couldn't afford it. They paid for that dumb motivational retreat in Arizona. Remember that? The one with the life coach who told you your energy wasn't aligned with your destiny? I was eating instant noodles in a garage while you were sipping coconut water in a hot tub trying to manifest success. Don't talk to me about support." My mom clucked her tongue in that disappointed mom way, like I was the one being rude now. "Drew, that's not fair. Eric's had a rough journey. You don't need to throw it in his face." "No," I said, standing up. "What's not fair is being told my future didn't matter because he needed my tuition. What's not fair is being treated like a safety net, like the fallback plan if Eric messed up again." Which, surprise, he did. Again. Eric folded his arms and muttered, "You don't have to be a jerk about it." I turned on him. "You think I owe you something? After all these years? You think I've just been chilling this whole time, living the dream? I was homeless, Eric. I slept in a garage for 4 months. I worked 12-hour shifts repairing computers for minimum wage just so I could afford a used Chromebook and an internet plan. I taught myself to code from scratch, built a portfolio from nothing, freelanced for people who paid in gift cards until I landed my first real gig. You had parents funding your failures while I had to treat mine like death sentences. And now you're here saying you didn't get support." That shut him up. For a moment, at least. My dad stood, trying to defuse things the way he always did. Gruff tone, hands on hips, trying to play peacekeeper without actually taking a side. "All right, that's enough. We didn't come here to fight. We just need help. That's all. We're family. Family." That word hit different coming from him. It felt hollow. Performed. A script he'd used one too many times without ever meaning it. "Funny," I said. "I don't remember being family when I was sleeping in a hoodie because I couldn't afford heat. I don't remember being family when you told me to be realistic and handed my future to Eric like it was spare change. My mom's voice grew tighter, more defensive. We were trying to keep the family together. You always acted like you didn't need us. I didn't want to need you, I said quietly. We stood in silence for a while. The air was thick with everything unsaid. Regrets, blame, broken expectations. And then my mom, clearly desperate to turn the emotional tide, placed her hand gently on my arm and said, "Drew, we're not asking for a gift. It's a loan. We know you're doing well now. You have your own business, right? You can spare it." It wasn't the money that broke me. It was the casualness, the assumption that my success existed for them, that everything I'd bled for, every sleepless night, every bitter winter I'd spent shivering in front of a space heater, was just a resource they could tap into when Eric dug himself into another hole. That's when I realized they didn't see me as a person. Not really. I was a safety net, a resource, the plan B. And the worst part? They didn't even seem ashamed of it. I didn't yell. I didn't throw them out. I just stood there, staring at them, and said, "You need to leave." My mom looked wounded, like I'd slapped her. "Drew, now," I said sharper, "before I say something I won't take back." My dad muttered something about ungrateful under his breath. Eric just looked stunned, like this was the first time in his life he'd ever been told no and didn't know how to process it. They left. No hug, no goodbye, just the sound of my front door clicking shut, followed by the fading shuffle of footsteps in the hall. I stood there in the silence, the lasagna still on the table, untouched. But that wasn't the end. 2 days later, I got a call from my Aunt Marlene, my mom's sister. She's the only relative who ever checked in on me after I left home. I hadn't spoken to her in months, but she called me in a panic. "Drew," she said, "I need to warn you. Your parents are telling everyone you cut them off for no reason, that you refused to help your brother in a time of crisis. People are calling you selfish." My stomach dropped. "What?" "Yeah. Apparently Eric told the family you're sitting on millions and refused to loan him a penny. Your mom's crying to everyone about how she raised a cold-hearted son. And now your cousin's talking about setting up a GoFundMe for Eric." That's when the nausea kicked in. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the smear campaign. The twisting of the story to make me the villain again. It was high school all over again, where Eric crashed my bike and told my parents I'd forgot to lock it, and I got grounded for a month. Only now the stakes were higher. My name was being dragged through the mud by people who hadn't spoken to me in years. I thought that was as bad as it would get. I was wrong. Because a week later, I got a letter. Not an email. Not a text. A letter. Mailed. Stamped. Signed. It was from a lawyer. My parents were threatening to sue me for emotional damages. I kid you not. Emotional damages. They claimed that my refusal to help had caused Eric such distress that he was now suffering significant mental anguish and reputational harm, and that they were seeking restitution for the sake of family unity. It was absurd, but it was also real. I had to hire a lawyer, pay fees, sit through consultations explaining that I owed them nothing, that there was no legal ground for their case. It never made it to court, of course. Their lawyer probably realized how flimsy it was and backed off. But the message was clear. This wasn't just desperation anymore. This was war. And that was the moment something in me shifted. Not just anger. Not just betrayal. Resolve. Because if they wanted to treat me like an enemy, they were about to learn how dangerous it was to push someone who spent 5 years clawing their way out of the dirt without a single hand offering to help. I stopped being afraid. I stopped hoping for an apology that was never coming. I started looking at everything I'd built. Not just the company, but the connections, the influence, the quiet respect I'd earned in the tech community. And I realized I had more power than they ever gave me credit for. That's when the plan began to form. And let me tell you, they had no idea what was coming. I didn't sleep the night the letter came. Not because I was scared of some bogus lawsuit. I wasn't. The legal system wasn't on their side, and I knew it. But it still did something to me. The paper trembled in my hands, even though I wasn't cold. It wasn't fear, not really. It was something deeper, something hollow. A realization that I had tried so hard to become someone they'd respect, someone they'd see, and all I'd earned was a thread in writing. That night, I stared at my bedroom ceiling and thought about the kid I used to be. The one sitting cross-legged in the garage, teaching himself how to build a game where cats chased lasers. The one who once believed that if you worked hard enough, you'd earn your family's pride. Turns out, The only thing I earned was a target on my back the moment I proved I could stand without them. I hit a low I didn't expect that week. It wasn't dramatic. I didn't cry into my pillow or scream at the wall. It was quieter than that. I stopped answering emails, paused every client project I had, let my phone battery die, and didn't bother recharging it for 2 days. Food didn't taste like anything. The world didn't feel like anything. I wasn't depressed, not exactly. I was just worn out, spiritually threadbare. Like the part of me that used to fight had gone to sleep. My lawyer, Mitch, a solid guy I met through a developer conference, called and left a message. They've got no case. Don't worry, but call me back when you're ready. I didn't call him back for a week. The letter sat on my kitchen counter like a rotten piece of fruit. I didn't touch it, but I couldn't throw it away either. The worst part wasn't the attack, it was the silence after. I started to wonder if maybe they were right. Maybe I had become cold. Maybe success had hardened me. Was it so wrong to help your own brother when he was drowning? That kind of thought slithered in late at night, when the house was too quiet and the city outside had gone to sleep. You'd be amazed at how convincing your worst thoughts can sound when no one's around to challenge them. But then I got a text. It was from Colin, an old friend from the garage days. We used to take turns fixing dead laptops and eating chili when we were both broke and dreaming of Silicon Valley. He'd made it too, joined a cybersecurity startup a couple of years ago, and was now lead architect. We hadn't talked in months, but out of the blue, he messaged, "Hey, I saw your latest app launch. Freaking brilliant, man. Proud of you." I stared at the text for a long time. It wasn't a big thing, just one sentence, but it snapped something back into place. Because he knew where I came from, what it took, that I wasn't some cold-hearted tech bro swimming in cash. I was the kid who rewired old routers for rent money. The guy who once built an entire back-end system from scratch just to prove he could. That reminder lit a fuse. I plugged in my phone, returned Mitch's call. "I'm good," I told him. "Thanks for holding the line. Let's shut this down clean." He sounded relieved. "They've already gone quiet," he said. "I think they realized they were outmatched." "Let them stay quiet," I said. But I wasn't done. Once the legal dust settled, I got to work. Not out of spite, not yet, but out of necessity. I needed to rebuild what they'd shaken. Not just my business, but my mindset. I started with the basics. Cleaned my apartment, sorted through overdue messages, replied to clients with honest updates. One of them, an AI startup in Austin, had been waiting on a dashboard tool I'd promised before everything blew up. I emailed them, apologized, and told them I'd understand if they moved on. They didn't. Instead, their CTO responded, "We'll wait. You're worth it." Another ember lit. For the first time in weeks, I sat down at my desk with purpose. Opened up VS Code, adjusted my monitor height, cracked my knuckles. I pushed the lawsuit out of my mind and dove into the code like it was a lifeline. 4 days later, the dashboard tool was done, and better than I expected. The CTO called me and said, "This is the best UX we've ever had. If you're open to it, we want to bring you on for something bigger. Equity level." And just like that, I was back. But it wasn't about money anymore. I had enough. I didn't need to chase 6 figures every quarter or land a new client every week. What I needed was to reclaim something. My voice, my direction, my self-worth. So I did something I'd never done before. I started writing. Not code, words. I opened a blank document and started journaling everything. Not for a blog, not for social media, just for me. I wrote about the garage days, the cheap ramen, the nights I fell asleep watching Stack Overflow tutorials, the times I almost gave up. I wrote about the way my mom used to say computers don't pay the bills, and how Eric once mocked my projects as nerd stuff. The writing wasn't perfect. It wasn't even good, but it was true. And it reminded me that my story wasn't something to be ashamed of. It was fuel. It was proof that I had built something from nothing, that I was something. Then something strange happened. One of the startups I worked with, a mental health platform, asked if I'd be willing to write a guest post for their founder's blog about resilience in the tech space. I said no at first. I wasn't a writer. I was a builder. But then I thought about what Colin had said, about being proud. So I said yes. I wrote about the garage, about being told I was wasting my time, about the $300 and the cracked laptop, about teaching myself code by moonlight and sheer desperation. I didn't name my family, but I didn't protect them either. I told the truth. The post went live 3 weeks later. It exploded. Thousands of views. comments from young developers who saw themselves in my story, emails from people who said, "I thought I was alone." One message came from a girl in Idaho who said she was living in her car, trying to learn coding on a phone with a cracked screen. She wrote, "Your story made me believe I can make it too. Thank you." I sat with that for a long time. That was the moment I realized I didn't need my parents' approval anymore. I didn't even want it. Because I had something better. Impact. My story mattered to people who actually cared, who actually listened, who saw me. And that was the rise. It didn't come with confetti. There was no big made it moment with champagne and fireworks. It was quieter than that. It was waking up and not feeling ashamed of being ambitious. It was walking past my old repair shop and smiling instead of cringing. It was saying no to a big contract because I didn't need to prove myself anymore. It was peace. But the fall? That part wasn't over yet. Because even as I rebuilt myself, I knew something was still hanging in the air like a storm cloud on the horizon. My parents had gone quiet, sure. But silence wasn't safety. It was just the sound of something brewing. And I was finally ready to face it. Because when the storm came again, I wasn't going to run. I was going to stand in the center of it and let it try. And when it passed, there'd be nothing left of the old story. Only the truth. Only me. But the setup for that? The plan I put in motion after? That's what changed everything. It started with an email. Not a threatening one. Not one from a lawyer. Just a simple message that read, "Hey Drew, long time no talk. I heard you're doing some great things. Would love to reconnect. Maybe grab coffee." It was signed Tiffany, followed by a smiley face. Tiffany was my cousin. More specifically, Eric's favorite cousin. The one who used to tell me to lighten up every time Eric insulted me at family events. The one who once laughed when Eric changed my laptop password as a prank the night before my college entrance interview. I hadn't spoken to her in almost 6 years. I stared at the email for a long time before closing my laptop. Something was moving. The timing was too perfect. The lawsuit had fizzled out barely a month ago. The blog post had gone viral. My freelance work had doubled, and I'd just been invited to speak on a tech panel for up-and-coming developers. For the first time in my life, I had leverage, status, network, money, and a story people actually cared about. So why was Tiffany trying to grab coffee? I didn't respond. Instead, I sat down and started mapping things out, on paper, old school. I drew a timeline of everything that had happened since I left home. The betrayal, the garage, the rebuild, the lawsuit, and now this, reaching out. The same people who threw me away were starting to circle back. Why? Because the story had flipped. I wasn't the dropout tech nerd with a pipe dream anymore. I was a founder, a builder, a name. Not a celebrity, not yet, but I was visible, and in their world, visibility meant opportunity. And money. That's when I decided I wasn't just going to move on. I was going to move through, not out of anger, not even for justice, for clarity, for every kid who'd been the backup plan in their family, for every sibling who was sacrificed at the altar of the golden child. For me, I was going to show them what they threw away, and I was going to make sure they couldn't rewrite the story this time. The first thing I did was say yes to the tech panel. It was scheduled for late October, 4 months away. That gave me time to build something big, something that would land with enough force to make waves, the kind of thing that couldn't be ignored or downplayed. So I reopened the project I'd shelved 2 years ago, a platform for freelance developers, built by freelancers. No fluff, no corporate nonsense. Just raw, honest tools, secure contract templates, payment protection, portfolio showcasing, and a community that wasn't fueled by upvotes or fake clout. I had sketched it during a rough patch in year 3, but shelved it when a client wave hit. Now, with income stable and support at my back, I knew it was time. I reached out to Colin first. "Remember DevNet?" I texted, "It's time." He replied in 5 minutes. "You serious? Count me in." Then I called Lila, a UI/UX designer I'd worked with on a fintech project last year. She was sharp, fast, and had the rare gift of designing interfaces that didn't make you want to gouge your eyes out. She didn't hesitate. "You're building it for the people who never get the spotlight," she said. "Let's do it." Within 2 weeks, we had a remote team of 5. Me, Colin, Lila, a back-end genius from Lagos named Obi, and a QA tester named Mira I found through a Reddit thread of all places. We didn't sleep much. We didn't need to. The momentum was real. But I didn't just want to build a great product. I wanted to tell a story. My story. So in parallel, I started documenting the process. I called it From the Garage, a behind-the-scenes video series showing how DevNet was built from scratch by 5 people who'd all been overlooked in some way. No drama, no forced virality, just real people solving real problems. The first episode got 10,000 views. The second? 40,000. Then someone on LinkedIn shared it with a quote, "This is what tech used to be, builders building." Comments flooded in from students, freelancers, and burned-out devs who said they finally felt seen. I still hadn't said anything about my family, but I knew they were watching. Tiffany emailed again. This time she was more direct. "Your parents saw your video. They've been asking about you. Eric said he's willing to apologize. Maybe we can all get dinner." Apologize? Eric? The same guy who tried to sue me for emotional damages? Who told half the family I was hoarding millions while he was fighting for his future? I didn't respond, but I started preparing. Because what Tiffany didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had already begun gathering information. I reached out to Aunt Marlene again. She'd always been the only one who didn't treat me like a disappointment. I asked if she'd heard anything more about Eric's situation. She had. Apparently, the $120,000 mess was far bigger than I imagined. It wasn't just debt. Eric had defrauded an investor. He'd pitched a fake crypto coin, gotten funding under false pretenses, and was now being investigated. He'd used our parents' house as collateral for a private loan to cover the losses, without telling them the full truth. And now the bank was circling. That's why they wanted dinner. That's why they wanted peace. Not because they missed me, because they needed me. So I gave them what they wanted. I agreed to meet. We scheduled dinner at a mid-range Italian place near the suburb where they lived. A neutral zone, public enough to avoid a scene. I wore a simple dark button-up and jeans, clean, confident, unflashy. Let them see success without the show. I arrived on time. They were already there. My mom stood up and hugged me like we hadn't spent 5 years pretending each other didn't exist. My dad nodded like we were old poker buddies catching up after a long break. Eric gave me the kind of half-smile you give someone when you owe them everything but can't admit it. I didn't hug back. I just sat. We made small talk. My mom asked if I was still doing computers. My dad asked if my car had one of those Tesla dashboards. Eric avoided eye contact until the drinks arrived. Then, finally, he said it. "I messed up." I stayed quiet. "I just thought I could build something fast," he continued. "You made it look easy. I thought if I just pushed hard enough, something would land." "You stole," I said flatly. "You lied." He flinched. "I know. And I'm sorry." My mom reached for my hand. "We didn't know everything until recently. He kept us in the dark. We thought maybe, if you were willing to help." And there it was. The ask. I didn't respond. I just sipped my water, then reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a small white envelope. My mom's eyes widened. "What's that?" I slid it across the table. Eric opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper, a screenshot of the From the Garage video thumbnail, with the caption, "We don't save those who threw us away. We build without them." And below it, in bold letters, "I already helped. Just not you." They didn't get it. At first. Then Eric looked up, jaw tight. "You think you're better than us now?" "No," I said. "I know I am." My mom's eyes welled up. My dad muttered something about pride. Eric stood and dropped the envelope like it burned him. This isn't over. But it was. They just didn't know it yet. Because I had one last move to make. And trust me, that was the real checkmate. They say revenge is best served cold, but I didn't want it cold. I wanted it calculated. Surgical. Not to destroy them, but to show them, without a single doubt, what they lost when they pushed me away. When they bet everything on Eric and treated me like the backup plan. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to humiliate them publicly. I just needed to press the right pressure points at the right time. And so, I began with the one thing they always underestimated: information. After that awkward dinner, I went home, logged into my private research folder, and opened what I'd been quietly building for weeks, a collection of receipts. Not literal ones, digital ones. Screenshots, emails, public records. It started with Eric's fake crypto project, NeoCoinX, a flashy, buzzword-laced site he'd thrown together with a Wix template, full of promises and hype, but absolutely no white paper or technical documentation. The kind of scam you could smell from 2 clicks away. But he had investors, some minor, one major. A mid-tier angel investor from Chicago named Alan Cross, who had dropped $80,000 into Eric's pitch after being shown forged early revenue numbers. I confirmed that via a cached investor deck Eric had uploaded to a private file-sharing site, which he'd accidentally linked on his now-defunct LinkedIn page. Sloppy. Typical. I could have gone to Alan directly, sent the proof, blown it wide open, but that would have made it personal. I wanted it to feel inevitable. So instead, I used DevNet. At that point, the platform was weeks away from launch. Our closed beta had already hit 5,000 users. Developers, designers, QA testers, even project managers. We had a waiting list of people ready to drop Upwork and Fiverr like dead weight. Our soft launch was scheduled to go live the same week as the tech panel I'd been invited to speak on, and I made sure it would be Eric's unmaking. Here's how. I released a new blog post as part of our Stories from the Underground launch campaign. Each post featured a real freelance journey, people who had been burned by the system and rose from it. I wrote mine anonymously under the name Code Phoenix. It was raw, detailed, and unfiltered. I laid it all out. How I was denied my college fund because my brother needed it more. How I left home with $300 and a broken laptop. How the same people who dismissed me came crawling back when my success became convenient. And how the golden child, after years of burning every opportunity, had now committed fraud and tried to drag me down with him. I didn't name names, but I did link receipts, public documents, archived web pages, the investor deck, a cached copy of the NeoCoinX site, a screenshot of the GoFundMe Eric's friend had launched under false pretenses. The post hit 100,000 views in the first 48 hours. It got shared on Reddit, Hacker News, Tech Twitter. Even a few niche YouTube channels picked it up for commentary. And then came the email. From Alan Cross. Subject line. Is this about NeoCoinX? I didn't reply right away. I let it marinate. Then, 3 days before the tech panel, I sent him a polite response. Alan, it is. I can't speak directly for legal reasons, but I recommend reviewing the pitch deck Eric Nolan sent you and comparing it to the current status of the project. I believe you'll find some inconsistencies worth your attention. Regards. DN. He responded within an hour. Thank you. Legal is on it. I thought that was the end of it. I didn't expect what happened next. The panel event arrived. A big one. Live-streamed, 15K viewers, hosted by a major freelance platform. I was slotted last, which meant I closed the show. Perfect positioning. I gave the speech of my life. I didn't make it about revenge. I made it about value. About overlooked talent. About the people building quietly while the loud ones flame out. I spoke about the gig economy, about why platforms like DevNet were born, because too many builders were being crushed under the weight of broken systems and broken promises. And I ended with this. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is being underestimated. Because while they're busy betting on someone louder, you get the space to become someone stronger. And one day, when they come knocking, not out of love, but out of need, you'll realize they never saw you at all. But by then, it won't matter. Because you'll have already built something they can never touch. Standing ovation. By the time I got off stage, my phone was blowing up. Alan had filed suit. The NeoCoinX investor group released a public statement. Eric's site had been taken down. And then, 2 days later, the real fallout began. My parents' house, the one Eric used as collateral, it was seized. Apparently, the bank had tried to contact them months ago, but Eric had been intercepting the notices. When they finally got the official letter, it hit like a grenade. They called me. Voicemail after voicemail. My mom crying. My dad yelling. Eric, pleading. I didn't answer a single one. Instead, I posted one final blog entry. A goodbye. You can love people and still walk away from them. You can forgive someone and still hold them accountable. I don't hate my family, but I love myself more. And that's why I'm done. I shut down the blog the next day. Let the story rest. DevNet launched to the public a week later. We trended on Product Hunt. Colin gave me the biggest bear hug of my life during our team Zoom call. Lila cried. Obi said, told you this would shake the system. Mira baked a cake and posted a photo with Garage to Glory written in blue frosting. And me? I moved on. Moved up. Bought a condo near the city. Started mentoring young developers. Invested in a few small startups that reminded me of my younger self. I stayed low profile, but my name carried weight now. The industry knew me. Not as the bitter tech guy with family baggage, but as the builder. The fighter. The guy who turned betrayal into blueprint. As for my parents, they moved in with Tiffany, apparently. Or maybe it was another cousin. I didn't follow up. Their GoFundMe quietly vanished. No one talks about Eric anymore. He changed his name on social media to E.J. Nolan and tried to start a podcast about entrepreneurship and mindset. It never made it past 3 episodes. He DM'd me once. Said, "You really destroyed me, man." I didn't reply, because I didn't destroy him. He did that all by himself. All I did was show the world who he really was. And the moment they saw the truth, he crumbled, just like he always did. The difference was, this time, I wasn't there to clean it up. I wasn't the backup plan anymore. I was the blueprint. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't what you do to them. It's what you build without them.